What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down with a host who forgets the meaning of basic courtesy? You won't believe what unfolded when Denzel Washington appeared for what should have been a routine promotional interview, only to find himself on the receiving end of hostility from the very first question. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. It became a masterclass in how not to treat your guests, and the fallout left viewers stunned. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below, because what happens next, as one of cinema's greatest talents reaches his breaking point on live television, will leave you speechless. Last night's episode of Good Morning America began like any other broadcast. The familiar theme music played, the cameras rolled, and Robin Roberts sat across from Denzel Washington in the studio's plush interview chairs. But within minutes, what started as a standard promotional chat for Washington's latest directorial project transformed into one of the most uncomfortable confrontations in morning show history. The tension was palpable from the moment Washington took his seat. Roberts, known for her occasionally combative interviewing style, seemed to arrive with an agenda that went far beyond discussing his new film. Her smile was polite, but her tone carried an unmistakable edge. "Denzel, good morning," she began, her words crisp. "There's been some controversy around your recent comments about the entertainment industry and social media. Some say your views are outdated, even hypocritical given your own career trajectory." Washington's eyebrows lifted slightly, a subtle cue that he hadn't expected such an abrupt shift in tone. Leaning back, he studied Roberts with the calm focus that has defined so many of his most powerful performances. "Good morning, Robin," he replied evenly. "I'm here to talk about my film, but I'm happy to discuss my views if that's where you'd like to go." His tone was controlled and professional, yet those familiar with Washington's interviews knew what that calmness meant. He was gearing up for battle. Roberts either didn't notice or chose to ignore the warning signs. "But don't you think it's problematic?" she pressed. "When someone of your stature criticizes the very platforms that give a voice to people who might not otherwise be heard? Some say you're out of touch with how young people communicate today." The studio seemed to freeze. Camera operators exchanged uneasy glances. Even the usual background chatter quieted. Washington's jaw tightened slightly. His response came measured but edged with steel. "Robin, I think there's some confusion between what I actually said and what's been reported," he replied. "I've always supported new voices and opportunities. What I question is replacing genuine human connection with the instant, often uninformed reaction social media encourages." Instead of easing the tension, Roberts leaned in, her energy sharpening. "That sounds like someone trying to preserve the old system," she challenged. "Your generation had opportunities you're now suggesting younger people shouldn't pursue." The words landed like a gauntlet thrown. For the first time, Washington's composure visibly shifted. His hands, which had rested calmly on the chair, now gripped the arms. When he spoke again, his voice dropped into that unmistakable, commanding register known to moviegoers everywhere. "My generation," he repeated slowly, "worked hard to open doors. Doors I've spent my career keeping open. So I'd be careful about assuming what I believe or what I tell anyone to do." What followed was no longer a polite morning chat. It was a clash of wills broadcast live. As one of Hollywood's most disciplined performers made it clear he would not be disrespected. Roberts didn't relent. "But your recent comments about social media influence and instant fame," she pressed, "don't they essentially dismiss an entire generation of creators and influencers who've built legitimate careers?" Washington let out a short, humorless laugh. "Legitimate careers," he repeated, the words tasting like irony. "Robin, are we really going to sit here and pretend that someone going viral for dancing in their bedroom is the same as what Sidney Poitier, Ruby Dee, or James Earl Jones devoted their lives to perfecting? Let's not confuse fame with craft." The comparison struck like lightning. Roberts visibly stiffened. "So you're saying their work isn't real? That they don't deserve respect or recognition?" "That's not what I said, and you know it," Washington snapped, his legendary composure starting to crack at the edges. "What I'm saying is there's a difference between entertainment and artistry, between viral moments and lasting impact. But apparently, having standards now makes me the villain in your story." The studio fell completely silent, The faint hum of the cameras was the only sound. Crew members exchanged uneasy looks. Even the teleprompter operator hesitated, uncertain whether to keep rolling or brace for chaos. Behind the glass, Robert's producer waved frantically. Whether signaling to continue or abort was anyone's guess. But Roberts, now fully locked into confrontation mode, pushed even harder. "I think what a lot of viewers are hearing," she said, "is someone who benefited from a certain system now criticizing those trying to create their own opportunities outside of it. Isn't there a bit of hypocrisy in that?" The word hit like a slap. Washington's posture shifted instantly, shoulders squared, gaze fixed, the air thick with the kind of stillness that precedes a storm. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously calm, carrying the quiet authority of a man who'd spent a lifetime mastering control. "Hypocrisy?" he repeated softly. "Robin, I need you to explain exactly what you think you know about my journey, the obstacles I've faced, the doors that were slammed in my face, and the work I've done to open those same doors for others. Because right now it sounds like you're reading from talking points, not truth." For a moment the air seemed to freeze. Then, instead of backing down, Roberts made a choice, a fateful one. Rather than recognize that she'd pushed too far, rather than acknowledge that the man across from her was one of the most respected figures in Hollywood, now visibly reaching his limit, she decided to escalate. With a deliberate movement, she reached beneath the desk and pulled out a stack of papers. The gesture was too practiced to be spontaneous. She'd come prepared. "Actually, Denzel," she said, her voice turning smug, "since we're talking about hypocrisy, I have some quotes here from past interviews. Let's see if you can explain the contradictions." Washington's expression went completely still. The transformation was chilling. The charming movie star had vanished, replaced by a man calculating exactly how far he was willing to go. Live, and on camera. When he finally spoke, his voice was a whisper, but it carried more menace than a shout. "So you're going to read my own words to me? Live on air, like this is some kind of gotcha game?" His eyes never left hers. "Robin, I want you to think very carefully about what you're doing right now. Because once you cross this line, there's no pretending this is just a friendly morning show chat." The warning hung in the air, measured, unmistakable, and delivered with the authority of a man who'd built a career on commanding presence. But Roberts, either overconfident or oblivious to the gravity of the moment, forged ahead. "Here's what you said in 2019 about method acting," she began, reading from her notes with theatrical precision. "You called it self-indulgent nonsense and said actors who can't break character are hiding behind technique instead of doing the work. Then in 2022, you praised several method actors and said you'd come to understand the approach better after working with younger performers. Care to explain the contradiction?" "So which is it?" The question was delivered with the sharp, prosecutorial tone usually reserved for cornered politicians, not a world-class artist discussing his craft. Washington's reply came swift, precise and devastating. "Robin, are you seriously suggesting that learning and evolving over 3 years is a character flaw? That gaining new perspectives through experience makes me a hypocrite?" His voice didn't rise in volume but in intensity, the kind that makes an entire room lean in. "Because if that's your standard, I'd love to hear you explain every opinion you've changed since 2019. Roberts flipped through her notes again, the motion brisk and deliberate like a prosecutor loading another round. "And what about this?" she pressed. "Last year you said social media was destroying genuine discourse, yet your production company uses those same platforms to promote your projects. Isn't that using the very system you criticize?" The studio had become a pressure cooker. Camera operators kept rolling, capturing every charged second of what was rapidly becoming one of the most uncomfortable interviews in morning television history. Production assistants stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or simply let the confrontation burn itself out. Even the teleprompter operator had abandoned the script entirely. This was uncharted territory. Then Washington stood. The sudden motion drew a collective intake of breath. But he didn't storm off. Instead, he circled around to face Roberts directly, his movements deliberate, controlled in a way that somehow felt far more dangerous than open anger. "Let me help you understand something. Robin," he said, his voice carrying the full gravity of decades in the business. "Using a tool responsibly and believing that tool is being misused by others are not mutually exclusive. My production company uses social media because we live in the real world. Not because I think the current state of online discourse is healthy or productive. For a fleeting second, Robert seemed to register that she'd gone too far, but pride, or fear of backing down on live TV, drove her to press on. But don't you see how that sounds to people trying to build careers and create content? She countered. It sounds like you're saying the rules are different for established stars like yourself. That was the breaking point. Washington's laugh was sharp and without warmth. Different rules? He repeated, the words cutting through the air. Let me tell you about different rules, Robin. Different rules are when I had to be twice as good as everyone else just to get half the chances. Different rules are when I had to fight for roles that should have been mine without question. Different rules are when people wondered if a black actor could carry a major film, or if audiences would even show up to see it. The raw truth in his voice hit the studio like a shockwave. Roberts blinked, clearly caught off guard but still unwilling to surrender. But that's exactly my point, she argued, her voice rising. You overcame those challenges, you succeeded. So why criticize people who are trying to overcome their obstacles in different ways? Washington's eyes flashed, the calm veneer gone. Because there's a difference, he said, voice low and sharp as a blade, between overcoming obstacles through dedication, craft, and perseverance, and expecting success to come from viral moments and instant gratification. There's a difference between earning respect and demanding it. The exchange had moved beyond journalism. It wasn't an interview anymore. It was a reckoning. Roberts' carefully orchestrated ambush was unraveling. Her questions were no longer measured. They came scattered, desperate. So you're saying young creators today aren't dedicated? That they don't work hard? That their achievements aren't legitimate? Washington stepped closer to her desk, his presence consuming the space. The energy in the studio shifted. The audience, the crew, everyone seemed to feel it. I'm saying dedication means more than posting content and waiting for likes, he said, every word deliberate. I'm saying craft means more than whatever happens to go viral this week. And I'm saying that someone with your platform should know the difference instead of creating controversy where none exists. The accusation hit its mark. Robert's face flushed. Her confidence faltered. I'm not creating controversy, she shot back, though her voice lacked the conviction it carried earlier. I'm asking legitimate questions about statements you've made publicly. Washington didn't hesitate. His response came sharp and final. No, Robin. What you're doing is taking quotes out of context, manufacturing contradictions that don't exist, and ambushing a guest who came here in good faith to talk about his work. That isn't journalism. It's a hit job. The studio went utterly silent save for the low hum of equipment and the faint whispers of crew members. Roberts glanced around, searching for support from her producers, but their expressions made it clear. This had spiraled far beyond anything they'd planned. But Washington wasn't done. Years of navigating hostile interviews, ruthless critics, and cutthroat industry politics had led to this moment, and he was about to deliver a response that would redefine the conversation. He straightened, filling the studio with a presence that demanded attention. When he spoke, every word carried the weight of decades of earned respect. Robin, I want you to look at me, he said, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. Really, Zreets, look at me. I am a 2-time Academy Award winner, 9 nominations, Presidential Medal of Freedom, honors from the Kennedy Center, the American Film Institute, countless institutions that celebrate excellence in the arts. Roberts shifted uncomfortably, caught off guard by the force of his authority. I've directed films, produced projects that launched careers, mentored dozens of young actors who are now stars in their own right. I've used my platform for education, veterans, and underserved communities for over 30 years. And here you are, trying to lecture me on hypocrisy and being out of touch. The rhetorical weight of the question hung in the air. No answer could possibly satisfy it. Washington stepped closer to her desk, his controlled intensity turning the room electric. Let me tell you what hypocrisy actually looks like, he continued, his voice sharp now, edged with danger. Hypocrisy is inviting someone onto your show under the guise of discussing their work, then ambushing them with a calculated attack designed to generate controversy and ratings. Hypocrisy is claiming to support honest journalism, while practicing the tabloid tactics that destroy careers and reputations. Roberts opened her mouth to speak, but Washington raised a hand, polite yet utterly commanding. I'm not finished. Silence fell again. Even the crew stopped, transfixed. You want to talk about being out of touch? Let's talk about a host who thinks ambushing respected guests is good television. Let's talk about someone who confuses aggression for insight, controversy for journalism. You've spent the last 15 minutes trying to tear down someone who spent 40 years building not just his career, but an entire industry's respect for the craft of acting. Robert's face paled, but she made one last attempt. Denzel, I think you're overreacting. These are legitimate questions viewers want answered. Washington laughed, harsh, humorless. Overreacting? Robin, the only thing I'm reacting to is disrespect masquerading as journalism. And if you think your viewers tuned in hoping to see you embarrass a guest who came here in good faith, then you understand your audience even less than you understand your role as a host. He began moving toward his chair, not to sit, but to retrieve the small clip-on microphone that would mark his exit. The gesture was subtle yet unmistakable. Here's what I think happened, he said as he unclipped the mic with practiced ease. Someone on your team decided that taking down Denzel Washington would make for good television. The studio held its breath. Everyone knew the moment was over, but the sting would linger. 15.5. I think you bought into the idea that controversy equals content, that conflict equals compelling viewing. Roberts made a desperate attempt to regain control. Denzel, please, let's continue this conversation. I think there's been a misunderstanding about my intentions. Washington paused mid-step toward the exit, turning to face her one last time. His expression was not angry. It was disappointment, quiet and devastating. There's no misunderstanding, Robin. Your intentions were clear from the very first question. You came prepared for an ambush, and you executed it exactly as planned. The only thing you didn't plan for was how it would feel when your guest refused to play along with your script. His tone shifted. No longer confrontational but deeply damning, a professional disapproval that carried the weight of decades in the industry. I've done interviews for 40 years. I've sat across from journalists who challenged me, who asked tough questions, who held me accountable. But they did it with respect, with context, understanding that their job is to inform viewers, not manufacture spectacle. Robert's eyes searched the studio, hoping for rescue from her production team. But their faces told her the truth. This disaster was hers alone. Washington's patience had transformed into something else entirely. Do you know the real tragedy here? His voice carried a quiet sadness. I came here excited to talk about a project I cared deeply about. A film tackling important themes with incredible performances from a diverse cast. Instead, we've spent 20 minutes creating controversy out of thin air. He shook his head. Decades of experience in media and professional disappointment etched into the gesture. This is what's wrong with media today. The focus isn't on meaningful conversation or elevating important work. It's on clicks, conflict, turning every interaction into a battleground. The studio was a tomb of silence, broken only by the deliberate rhythm of his footsteps toward the exit. But he wasn't finished. I hope your viewers understand what they just witnessed, he said, addressing the cameras for the first time since the confrontation began. They didn't see journalism. They didn't see accountability. They saw someone more interested in drama than dialogue. Roberts made a final attempt at control. Denzel, I hope you'll consider coming back when we can have a more productive conversation. Washington's response was swift, absolute. Robin, there won't be a next time. I don't do business with people who operate in bad faith, and today was as bad faith as it gets. He unclipped his microphone, handing it to an audio technician with a polite nod, acknowledging the crew even amid his disdain for the host's behavior. To your viewers, he said, looking directly into the camera, I apologize that you didn't get to hear about the incredible work being done by the cast and crew of our film. Perhaps you'll find another interview where the focus is on the art, not manufactured controversy. Without another word to Roberts, he walked off the set with the same dignity and presence that had defined every role, interview, and public appearance of his legendary career. The cameras rolled for a few more seconds, capturing Roberts alone at her desk, her carefully prepared notes scattered and useless. The studio remained in stunned silence, the kind that follows when someone is publicly outclassed by a master of their craft. And just like that, one of morning television's most explosive confrontations ended, leaving viewers with an unforgettable lesson. Professional ambush tactics meet uncompromising dignity only at the cost of being thoroughly outmatched by 40 years of earned authority.